Welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis. I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connections so you can have a thriving marriage. All right, so today we are tackling the topic of narcissism. All of the month of February, we're going to talk about this, what the experts say, what Greater Impact says, and maybe you'll come away with some tips on how to show up different in these sticky situations, as we like to call them. Now, just a quick disclaimer, we're not mental health professionals, but we do want to help you show up different when you're experiencing these behaviors. There's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of information out there. And one thing that is for sure is this is more common than you think. And sometimes we can even show up this way. So whether it's you, whether it's people you love, we're here to help. And we hope that today's episode can give you some new ideas. So before we get started, I want to mention our website, greaterimpactwives.org, where you can find a free PDF called 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells. We also have a free marriage assessment for you to download, where you can kind of check out where things are. And if you're interested, reach out to us and we can send you in the right direction. All right, so welcome, Nina. I am excited to talk to you about this topic.
I like that you use the word tackle. They were tackling the topic. Like, that feels awesome to think about it like that. And Kyle and I talked about this week too. And it's a brutal topic. I kind of hate it, to be honest.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Because, we hate labels, right? We don't want to give anyone a label, especially if there's no diagnosis. And we just know that it's just not helpful usually to the conversation. So I get it. And it's also unavoidable because, everyone's talking about it. It's on the socials, there's more and more and more information, it seems, about this. Everybody feels like they're dealing with it in some way. So I think, yeah, we probably could contribute to that conversation just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the biggest anti-biblical topic that there is, narcissism. It's really anti-Christ, if you will, to behave in the ways that this particular personality shows up. And Kyle was mentioning last week, and he's got the master's degree, so he can diagnose people with this thing. His big point was, you got to have all of these boxes checked here for it to be actually a thing. And it hardly ever gets diagnosed because those people don't think they need therapy, right?
Yes.
So we're sitting here as armchair psychologists, you probably are too, in your home listening to this, going, I know I'm married to a narcissist. It's like, you know what? Maybe you're bumping up against some narcissistic behaviors, but we will never really know if you are married to a narcissist. And the outcome of the discussion, I hope, is, what are some things we can do when we're interacting with some of these behaviors that are defined as that category of personality, we'll say. I like to label it as selfishness. And it shows up, in certain ways, absolutely. But anyway, we'll dig into this and see if we can't come up with something better.
All right. So yes, let's get into that. So one of the things, to your point, that is consistent are the hallmarks of this type of personality. And just with some research, I came up with this quick list. Some of this might apply, some of it might not. But generally speaking, a person with this type of personality usually has a sense of entitlement. They usually have emotional dysregulation, so they can sometimes appear reactive or explosive. They are victims in their thinking. They don't like to take ownership of anything. Gaslighting, stonewalling, projecting are common hallmarks as well. They don't really have boundaries. Empathy, a lack of empathy is a really big one that we see a lot. And generally, they just kind of aren't the same person in public. They have what a lot of people will say is a mask that they wear. So the person in private is different than the person in public, and it can just make it difficult to know which person is real. And so those are just a few things. Now, somebody might say, well, that could also be just somebody that's immature or emotionally immature.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to that going, yeah, all my granddaughters, they're 2 and 4 and they fit this. I know some junior high students, they fit this. I know some teenagers, they fit this. And then it's like, okay, yeah, there's immaturity here. Absolutely. But you come out of the womb narcissistic. Like, I want what I want when I want it. And I'm going
Yeah.
to let you know in every way possible. And boy, I think the goal of parenting is to help your child stop that, to be other focused and to serve other people. And I think we all start out this way as diagnosable narcissists, we'll say.
I would agree with that. So, yeah, basically, they're like children in an adult body, to your point. Okay, so just for the sake of today's conversation, we will assume we're actually dealing with somebody that's diagnosed. One of the traits that stands out to me the most is the lack of empathy. I feel like that one is such a hard one to overcome because it's foundational to relationships. Like you kind of need to care about people or how you're affecting other people just to have any healthy discourse or productive conversation. I mean, what are your thoughts on how to deal with someone who just does not seem to care how they're presenting themselves, how their decisions or actions are affecting you at all? They can hear feedback from you and just it doesn't faze them at all. Like, how does one even address something like that?
Yeah, guns and lawyers. Like, I mean, I mean that's a joke. I don't really mean that. But here's the deal: if they don't care, the
Yeah.
only way you're going to be able to deal with that is through really severe, strong, consistent boundaries. And when I'm interviewing people for the marriage intensive, I really look for this. Is there empathy? Do they have self-awareness enough to know that they've contributed to the issues in the marriage? And they may not show up this way with their spouse as having that awareness, but in dialogue with me, they might say, I know I'm doing stuff that's not helping. And, I don't, but if they can't do that, if they can't take some ownership, I won't work with them because I'm not going to drag their partner through hell of hearing all the great things they could be doing when they're working with somebody who really isn't going to try, because that's how that ends up. I don't have empathy. I'm not going to do anything different. This is all garbage. You're the one with the problem. It's like, yeah, my problem is I can't connect with you because you're not acting like human. This is human connection at the core. If you don't have empathy, or to the level that you do, that's the level of connection you're going to have. And that applies to both parties. So if you're somebody that has tons of empathy, tons of compassion, and you're married to somebody who's got like next to none, that's still how much connection you're going to have, is their level of empathy. Now, the good news with this is Jesus Christ is bigger than all of that.
Mm.
So, and I'm so thankful for that verse. I think it's somewhere in Isaiah that talks about the Lord being our husband. I think the Lord
Mm.
could be your wife also, because it's not just men that are like this.
Right.
And so the positive outcome here is, the Lord always has empathy. He always has compassion. And it is just, there's immeasurable amounts of it. So he will always be there when the people in our lives cannot.
Mm.
Yeah. So we have that to be thankful for sure. And
Mhm.
I'd also, say that even if you're married to somebody that's diagnosed as a narcissist, God's not done with them yet, and he's got stuff for you to learn. Like there will be no greater challenge in a marriage than being married to somebody that like has zero empathy for you. That's a huge, huge challenge, relationally speaking, I guess.
Yeah. So in terms of the what to say department, so taking all of that into account and you do the stuff you got to do with the Lord, but just you're married to the person.
Mhm.
Do like do you say what you said? I can't work with you, or I can't, like, what's an example of how to address that um when the relationship has to continue?
Yeah.
Is it just a boundary thing? Like what do you do?
So the thing we recommend to people is that you show up full identity of Christ. You love well. You're a good friend to this person. You model what you want. And then you ask for what you want. I need you to listen to me and tell me this person's terrible. I need you on my side in this conversation. Can you do that right now? And they'll
Mm,
probably say yes. And then they may not. Or they may say, well, I have opinions about this. Like, hold up. I don't want to hear them. I need your support right now. And if it doesn't work, then you end the conversation. But the other piece of this is that you're not wise if you bring your vulnerable stuff to somebody who has not demonstrated that they're going to hold that well. They're
mm,
not going to care for that, and you bring stuff that's important to you to them because you've been a good friend to them. It's normal to think reciprocity would be there, but if they cannot do that, it's unwise to bring those high level, really vulnerable pieces of yourself to them. And eventually, and it takes a while, it can take months or even years, they'll notice that you're spending time on the phone talking to your friends after you get a promotion at work, or they'll notice that you're working through your parenting challenges with your friends from church, and you're talking to them about them. They'll notice that they're not being consulted. And when they say, hey, how come you're talking about this stuff with them and not me? It's like, well, I can't think of a time when you've been there for me,
mm,
and this is important to me, so I need to talk to people that I can trust to care for me well in this space. And yeah, that might sound insulting, but it's the truth. And then, or whatever truth you have there, it seems like, in the last couple of years, I haven't been able to do this, right? Because most people, you picked him for a reason. You picked her for a reason. Like they might have
yeah.
done this at the beginning. Um, Unless you were so overwhelmed with hormones that you can breed well, that you didn't notice that they were terrible at friendship. But you got to tell the truth about
Yeah.
why you're not bringing yourself to the relationship, and that puts them in a position of choice, or at very least awareness. And then that might become a problem for them later, you know and they
Yeah.
might think about that. God can use the truth. What he doesn't usually use is masks and artificialness. So we want to be honest, but we also want to be wise, I'll say, about what we choose to bring to the relationship. So there's a difference between being truthful about what's happening and then being vulnerable. We save our vulnerability for people that have shown up trustworthy. Love
Mm,
for that to be our spouse, but if they're not, don't do that to yourself, right? So you have that boundary for yourself. I will bring my struggles and my celebrations to the people that will celebrate and struggle with me and not judge and condemn me. That's a boundary to have for yourself.
yeah. That's good. Now, you mentioned authenticity. I also think that is one of the hallmarks of this personality is that they seem disingenuous. Even with the empathy, sometimes you'll see this where it's more cognitive, they've like learned the behavior and they mirror the behavior. Or they might be a person that shows up one way at home and another way in public, and to the person in relationship with them, it's confusing because you're like, well, which one's the real version? You know, is this person who I think they are? So how do you address that? Is that something you can just say out loud, like, which one's the real you? Or, like
Well,
how do you address, disingenuine behavior?
yeah, I think we all do that to a certain extent. It's just kind of what level are you dealing with it in? Because you and I could have an argument, and our pastor could call, and we'd be like, "Oh, hey," right out of the gate with him when we were like snotty to each other. Not that you and I would do that, but that happens in relationships. You can just flip a switch and behave well.
Mm,
So then you have to look at what's actually true with that is that you're not doing your best in the relationship,
mm,
right? So having some boundaries around how you conduct yourself or what kind of behaviors you're going to be around is really useful. So when somebody is like this, and then they're like, you go to church and they're all, wonderful to everybody else and so friendly, and you get in the car and they're snotty to you, you get home, that's a time to like maybe pack the kids up and go somewhere for lunch without them. And they're like, where are you going? Well, I want to be with somebody who's kind. I don't know who you are. At church you're this way and at home you're this way. And I'm just not going to be around that today. And you have to point it out, but you
mhm,
also have to take action that takes care of yourself. So you're not going to just eat lunch and suffer with that person there doing that thing, right? You got to get away from it. And it's really like the more research comes out about how complaint and negativity affects us, like it is really not good for that to be an environment that you hang out in. It's really, really damaging to us emotionally, spiritually, relationally. So, and physically, because that's where it ends up manifesting itself, was it comes out in our bodies as well. So, when you're dealing with multiple personalities, right, that's just performance, which we all do to a certain degree, it's okay to point that out in a way that is around boundaries. If it's not anything that really affects you, like if they're not being rude or whatever, just let them sort themselves out, because eventually the goal is to be who you are, regardless of your circumstances.
right.
To be who you are, regardless of your circumstances. That doesn't mean that you're not wise about what you share and who you share it with. It just means that you're going to be truthful and honest, vulnerable, authentic at at the level of your identity in Christ. So
Mhm,
my guess is that if we get so fully healed, and to hitchhike back onto what we were talking about with the vulnerability space, it would at some point it wouldn't bother us at all, because Jesus
mhm,
wouldn't be bothered with it, right?
mhm,
So as we continue our own healing journey, then it doesn't cost us anything to share something that's vulnerable. And it's like, okay, well, you can act that way if you want to. I was hoping for something supportive, but all right, and you deal with the relationship end, but it doesn't hurt, it doesn't affect you. And I think that's the goal for all of us. And that is
mhm.
why some of us get in relationships with people like this, who, by the way, I see this all the time when I'm working with couples. Both people in the couple have usually been diagnosed by the other person's partner's therapist as being narcissistic. So, which isn't an accurate diagnosis because they've never met with the people, right? But they're saying, oh, they're probably a narcissist to both of them,
Yeah,
right? So, what's really true? It's like, who knows? How about we
right.
all have tendencies like this and we need to figure it out? I don't know.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay, so what about the victim mindset? So I know we've mentioned this before, and that's a big deal over here where we teach our clients to take responsibility. To your point, we can all have some of these traits, but this is definitely a hallmark with this personality. It's really hard to get them to own up to the things that they've done. I mean, they will gaslight you, they'll project, they'll minimize it, act as if it's just no big deal to avoid accountability.
Yeah.
Is there a way? Is there a what to say when you've been dealing with it not once, twice, or three times, but it's a pattern? And I mean, in any relationship, that can get exhausting. So,
Oh, yeah. So like no joke, like, oh, and it's everybody else's fault and it's your fault too, because you're around now, you're in the sphere, and so you get blamed as well. Yeah, so you have to realize that exactly what you said, this person is not taking responsibility. If you're in a relationship with them and it's close, like if this is a partner that you have, or a work, somebody, a coworker or whatever, then you've got to be in a space where you're able to create opportunity for them to take responsibility. And
Mm.
when they come and complain to you about whatever X, Y, and Z happened, it's like, huh, that's interesting. And they're like, well, it wasn't my fault. It's like, what are you going to do about it now? You're always calling them to a higher level of being. What are you going to do about it? You can also validate, yeah, this sounds really hard for you. And it's like, well, what do you mean for you? It's like, well, you're experiencing this and this is hard. So that's what I mean by this is hard for you. Well, yeah, you could have made this better. Yeah, I could have. I think that would have been disrespectful though, because that takes agency away from you and it would make other people think less of you. So that's why I'm not going to solve this for you. So, what do you think you can do about it? And they may not be ready for that conversation. But if you teach people that that's what they're going to get when they come to you, they're going to get validation and then they're going to get called up, then they'll start, depending on their maturity level, they'll start thinking of those things, or they'll stop coming to you and complaining to you, which is both of those are wins. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. Get away, go talk to yourself, talk to God. I don't need to hear your complaining. So, anyway, that sounds terrible, but it's like, please grow up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so one of the things I've heard that the experts will recommend, it's something called the gray rock method. And this is a way to basically regulate yourself and avoid the personality or the person with narcissism using your reactions against you, or like I've even heard it called being an emotional vampire. So these are the people that like will poke at you until you react. So the gray rock method is supposed to sort of help you avoid that. Just show no emotion, have as little reaction as possible. Do you think that that is an effective way to interact with
Oh,
someone?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're emotional, you're going to blow it up at some point. And, sometimes people, like, you see cycles in relationship. So there's a blow up and then people feel better just because there's a release of energy. And that's not a mature way of handling anything. And it's really damaging to the relationship. So creating an environment where you're not the word flappable, you're unflappable, oh gosh, Jazz, you're gonna,
Bulletproof.
yeah, what?
Bulletproof.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. The the bulletproof thing, as you look at the ability to be unoffended by what, and this is, being Jesus, you're healed to the point where this is really who you are. Then it's easy to be in those situations and just know what you're dealing with.
Mhm.
Your person is acting like the 4-year-old wounded version of themselves, and you're not going to get sucked into that. And being rational is 100% the best way to go about solving any kind of problem, especially relationship ones. And you're not feeding into the energy that really blows things up. And then you can say, hey, you know what? It seems like this is a really tough topic to talk about. Maybe we should take a break and try again when we can both be calm, even though you're not calm, not upset. They're upset, right? But you say when we can both be calm, so that they don't get more offended because that you've just accused them of not being calm. So you say we, and sometimes that helps, but we have a boundary of, I don't participate in conversations where there's emotionality, and I think that fits with the gray rock method. But boy, you got to be healed like nobody's business to be able to do that. So
Yes, yes. Which brings me to my next point. It's the having your identity in Christ rock solid. Like this kind of stuff can really wear on you emotionally and mentally. And if you're not showing up, or if you don't know who you are, or if you haven't done the work to heal, it's easy to be baited into those, you know, really horrible interactions. So you got to know who you are in that.
I agree. I agree. And that tool that we have, the connection steps, really helps with that process.
Mm, that's right. That's right. Okay, just a few more suggestions, I think, for our listeners. One of the things we say is when you're in this cycle of debating and arguing, which often happens with this personality, sometimes it's just best to stick to the facts, like avoid the gray areas, avoid getting into things that are based on opinion or subjective because you'll just find yourself going back and forth for hours. And
Mhm.
so if maybe you just stick to the facts and then maybe leave it at that, you might get further. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a huge deal actually, because when people say, "Well, you think I'm blah blah blah," or "You just want to blah blah blah," it's like, how do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Can we just talk about what the issue is? What I can see, taste, touch, or smell here. What I can put my hands on that happened. Let's just talk about the facts. That's in my head. You don't know what's in my head. Let's just talk about what's real.
Mm,
And in doing so, you stop the argument, because what are you going to do? You don't know. I'm not thinking that at all. Like, you're defensive now. You're defending something you shouldn't even be talking about, even if it was in your head. Like, it's not on the table. It was in your head for a reason. Leave it off the table. Don't bring that in, even if it's accurate, right?
right.
You got to stay rooted with the facts of the conversation, because we have sinful thoughts, and so does our partner. And those things, the reason we're not all telepathic is because God is protecting us from each other.
Mm,
Right?
I like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this bowl up here that's got my brain in it, that has to do some work to get something out of my mouth. Like, once you say something, then it's out there. But there's some stuff that, is like, oh, that Lord, have that thought. That should not be mine. Hope it's not. Hope that's just from the enemy. Woo, not a good one. You know, but that exists up there. So you don't
Yeah,
want to have those conversations. You want to have what's real. Stay in reality. Can you touch it? Is it factual?
definitely. And then the last thing I think is important, you kind of mentioned it earlier. God is bigger than all of this. Narcissists are not, immature are not, whatever names are out there, we're all his creation. And so he is ultimately bigger. He's the one that deals with us. He's the one that can reach places we can't reach with each other. And sometimes things don't change because he's trying to change us. So I think the point is that sometimes we just got to hang in there when it just kind of feels hopeless.
Mhm.
Any thoughts there?
Few things will create perseverance and dependence on the Lord than a painful relationship. It doesn't matter if it's with your spouse or one of your kids or your parents. The pain that exists draws you to Him. And at the end of the day, we need to be asking ourselves, is He enough? Can I be not just okay, but can I thrive because of my relationship with God? The rich young ruler shows up, and he's like, I've done all these things my whole life. I've followed the commandments, and, what do I need to do? And he says, sell all your stuff and come follow me. And the guy walks away sad, because Jesus knew this, right? That's why he got this special command. It's not a command for us to become homeless. Like, that's not it. He knew this man's heart, and he knew that he was holding on to his stuff more than he had the desire to connect with God. And so we have to ask ourselves over and over again, especially in places where we really want something. Is that a want, or is that a need? And if that's a need, then why is that there? Why isn't God enough? Well, He is. That's on me to tap into Him and be open to relationship at that level. And I'm probably not doing that, right? So we forget this on the daily. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
go to sleep and we forget who we are and whose we are. And so I think it's just a really important process to constantly remember that God is good. He's got blinders on people and he ain't taking them off till we learn what we're supposed to learn. Like that's, you look at Pharaoh, he did that to Moses 10 times. He'll do that to us too, because he wants us to learn and he loves us. He's a good father. So we're in that process. And will we receive that as love? Will we ask him, will you show me how you're enough? Will you help my heart align with yours so much that I get it? Help me get it. I don't even know what to ask here. And he's so good. He will teach us. And then you persevere in these relationships that are hard and are hard for years, because he is, and he is more than enough, no matter what. That's the lesson that we need to learn. That's what faith is. And guess what? Well, I see this all the time. When we stop needing something so desperately from somebody else and we get that need filled with the Father, suddenly that other person starts to change. I see it all the time. We've been at this 20 years. Y'all, it's a pattern, no joke. But you don't do it so that you can get that, right? You can't purchase that. It has to be real. It has to be authentic. And then it's astonishing to see what he does with it. So I'll leave you with that.
That's so good. So good. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. We're going to shift gears to our question of the day segment. This is where we pull questions from our clients based on their experiences. And we know, nothing is new under the sun. So likely you've experienced it or you might experience it in the future. So one client writes, we talk a lot about expectations at Greater Impact. But how do I deal with my husband's expectations that I'm just not able to meet? She says, I've tried to tell him gently, I'm just not able to get everything done as far as tidying up the house. We have small kids, and by the time they're in bed, I'm just too tired. He tells me that I have energy for my Facebook groups, and I should have energy to keep the house up. I know acts of service is his love language, but I just feel like I'm never doing enough to make him feel loved.
Yeah. Well, he gave her the answer. Acts of service is his love language. Hey, sweetheart, I will have so much more energy if you could just be responsible for dinner dishes forever. Like, so I made dinner. Can you clean up? Hey, sweetheart, can you, like, you ask for help, especially with a guy that has acts of service as his love language, right? And you measure and you do things to put energy into yourself. Yeah, good job having some friendship connections, absolutely. And Facebook groups, you need more than just that. You need actual physical contact with people that you can rub elbows with, like for real, get hugs, all of that. But you have to have this life and you have to have some balance in it. And raising little kids and being home and all that stuff, it's a lot of work. So figure out how to lighten some of your load, get rid of some of your stuff if you need to, so you have less stuff to deal with, and ask him for help. Some of marriage is a negotiation. So you can let him know, I'm going to have energy for you later if you can help me in this now and help me get the kids to bed. If she's doing 100% of that, she's also robbing her children of connection with their dad. So bedtime, so you don't want to do everything 24/7 because you can. You got to start sharing some of that so that they can have connection with him. And that bedtime routine, that's super important. It's a great time of connection for dads and kids. So he's got acts of service. Ask.
Ask. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is saying, I need help.
Yep.
All right. So what will you do with the information you have today? Again, go to our website and also check out the next episode on how to manage conflict in a sticky situation. Thanks for joining today. We'll see you next time.